Abigail's story is more than an ancient tale. It is a timeless lesson on how one person can change lives. With wisdom and courage, a single soul can alter the course of history. But what would you do if a fool risked not only your life, but your entire community? And what if destiny put you face to face with an angry future king ready to take revenge into his own hands? This is the very moment where Abigail, armed only with humble and faithful words, saved countless lives and left a legacy that still inspires us today. If you want to discover how this woman changed history and what we can learn from her incredible character, stay with us until the end. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories and share this video with your friends so they can also learn about Abigail's legacy. Get ready to step into a story that will make you reflect and admire true wisdom. In a dry, mountainous land at the heart of the region of Maon, there lived a woman whose name became synonymous with wisdom and virtue. Abigail, whose outer beauty was matched only by her noble spirit, stood out. In an era shadowed by heavy oppression and deep uncertainty, she was known for her sharp intellect, her ability to tell right from wrong, and her rare willingness to act with courage and grace under pressure. Abigail was married to a man named Nabal, a name meaning fool that suited him perfectly. His character proved it daily. He was extremely wealthy, owning massive herds of sheep and goats that grazed in the lush valleys of Carmel. Yet, despite his material wealth, his heart was full of pride, contempt for others, and a dangerous streak of recklessness. Nabal was known by his neighbors not for his generosity, but for his crude behavior and refusal to value the wisdom of those around him. From the start, the marriage of Abigail and Nabal was a study in contrasts. While Abigail radiated light, compassion, and wisdom, he retreated into the dark of selfishness and stubbornness. For Abigail, marriage was more than a personal commitment. She also understood she had a spiritual responsibility as a wife. Despite the constant challenges, she strove to fulfill her duty, to maintain peace and stability in her home. Abigail's daily life was never easy. Nabal, consumed by pride, routinely dismissed his wife's advice, even when it was full of wisdom. Abigail had to find subtle ways to act in order to prevent her husband's rash choices from harming their family and the servants who relied on them. With tact and cleverness, Abigail became an untiring mediator, settling clashes sparked by Nabal's hot temper. Her talent for diffusing tension did more than prevent disaster. It kept peace under her roof. Abigail's beauty was not just admired. It mirrored a deep inner integrity that set her apart from other women of her day. Her heart was full of devotion, and her carefully chosen words carried a wisdom that could touch even the most stubborn hearts. She was known for her kindness to the poor and for patiently guiding her servants, earning deep loyalty and respect from everyone under her roof. Nabal, on the other hand, was the polar opposite of everything Abigail stood for. His greed knew no bounds, and he routinely sneered at anyone seeking help, despite living in absolute luxury. On many occasions, he showed a complete lack of decency. Often the servants turned to Abigail for advice, knowing their master's volatile mood made everything incredibly difficult. In those moments, Abigail would respond calmly, serving as a beacon of sanity amidst the storms raised by Nabal's foolishness. Trouble in the marriage surfaced quickly. Abigail, despite her great wisdom, was not immune to the pain of her husband's constant insults and lack of respect. There were nights, after long days cleaning up Nabal's messes, when Abigail found comfort in prayer, seeking strength from God to keep going despite the heavy burden. Even in her darkest hours, she never allowed bitterness to take root in her heart. Instead, she stayed focused on the greater purpose of keeping peace and honoring the Lord. One highly telling incident early in their marriage revealed the difficult reality of the life that lay ahead of her. At a feast where Nabal got drunk and acted shamelessly, he insulted a powerful neighbor, causing tension to rise dangerously. Sensing the looming threat, Abigail quickly stepped in, apologizing and reassuring the neighbor that her husband did not speak for the whole household. Within their home, this event became a constant warning that Nabal's wild recklessness was a direct threat not just to himself, but to his entire household. Despite these painful trials, Abigail never let resentment poison her heart. Her inner strength was proof of her unshakable faith. She knew that God had a purpose even in her hardest moments, trusting that He would give her the wisdom to handle her troubled marriage. And so Abigail spent her days dealing with the harshness of the land and her difficult home life, while Nabal sank deeper into his own foolish madness. Yet she remained a pillar of strength, held up by a higher power that helped her face every trial with grace. Little did Abigail know that her character was about to be tested in a much more profound way, when her courage and wisdom would not only save her family, but shape the very destiny of a nation. The town of Maon, set in the rugged hills of Judah, was strategic yet harsh. Its steep cliffs and dry valleys provided a natural defense against enemies. To the northeast lay fertile Carmel, a much greener region, where the region's massive herds of sheep and goats grazed under the watchful eyes of their keepers. For the servants, life in these rugged lands was a delicate balance. Resources were scarce, and cooperating with neighbors was the only way to survive the harsh wilderness. Yet this fragile peace was constantly threatened by the sheer arrogance and reckless pride of Nabal. Despite his massive wealth, his foolish behavior sparked endless friction with everyone living in the region. Abigail, however, was the true heart of her home and highly respected in Maon. Renowned for her wisdom and tact, people often begged her to settle disputes before they spiraled out of control. Those forced to deal with Nabal's explosive temper saw Abigail as a fair, steady leader. Neighbors regularly came to her seeking sound advice and a helping hand. Though trapped in a home ruled by a harsh, selfish husband, Abigail became a shining beacon of grace and sanity for everyone around her. She understood that her high standing carried heavy responsibility, so she worked hard to build relationships rooted in respect and peace. The contrast between Abigail and Nabal was stark. While he flaunted his riches to mock those he deemed beneath him, Abigail quietly reached out to help the needy. More than once, she tried telling her husband that kindness was a higher calling. Yet she still chose to feed the poor behind his back, handing out food and provisions without Nabal ever realizing what was missing from his storehouses. Even so, some clashes were impossible to avoid. Nabal constantly picked fights with neighboring shepherds over property lines and precious watering holes for the sheep. Whenever trouble flared, Abigail stepped in quickly, using gentle but unwavering words to calm the heated tempers and restore peace. She made it clear that despite her husband's toxic behavior, she deeply valued staying on good terms with the community. Then a severe drought hit. Dry spells shrank resources, and tensions spiked to dangerous levels. Nabal flatly refused to share his water wells with local herders, even though those very men had previously guarded his flocks against desert bandits. Anger boiled over. The outraged shepherds threatened to take matters into their own hands and seize his livestock by force. Hearing the news, Abigail sprang into action. She brought water skins and food supplies as a peace offering, promising to find a fair solution. Her quick thinking diffused an explosive situation that could have easily turned bloody. Yet despite her best efforts, Abigail knew she couldn't fully undo the damage her husband caused. Most people in Maon openly despised him. Many times she endured bitter remarks about him, but she never spat back in anger. Instead, she masterfully steered the conversation towards something more constructive, showing a quiet grace that reflected the deep principles guiding her life. And Abigail's daily burdens were immense. Every single day, she had to clean up after her husband's bad choices, make sure the servants were treated fairly, and keep the vast household running smoothly. She also made sure the needs of the surrounding community weren't forgotten. At night, while the estate slept, Abigail spent long hours in quiet prayer, seeking strength from God to face the trials of the coming morning. Despite Nabal's terrible reputation in Maon, Abigail became a true pillar of hope. Her very presence softened the blow of his worst decisions. Though she knew she could never change his heart, she was determined to stop her household from bringing ruin to others. Life in Maon was a delicate tightrope, and Abigail walked it every single day. Even so, her faith and wisdom gave her strength to endure even when the pressure grew overwhelming. Without knowing it, these quiet trials were shaping Abigail for a massive test, a crisis that would challenge everything she had learned during years of keeping the peace in the hills of Judah. Meanwhile, a band of outlaws led by David was constantly roaming through the rugged hills, seeking refuge from a relentless king who wanted them dead. David, God's anointed, was not yet crowned. King Saul, consumed by jealousy, saw the young warrior as an imminent threat to his throne, forcing him to run and hide as a fugitive. But David was not alone. A band of fierce, loyal men chose to share his exile, forming a mobile camp that drifted through the desolate badlands of Judah. The wilderness, with its scorching sun and severe lack of food and water, made basic survival a brutal challenge. Days were punishing, while nights brought freezing temperatures and lurking danger. Yet David, with his natural charisma and strong leadership, kept his men's spirits high. They trusted that in due time, God's grand plan for him would unfold. Still, staying alive in such a barren wasteland was tough. Keeping the camp supplied was a daily nightmare. With about 600 men, the group required massive amounts of food and water in an environment where resources were virtually non-existent. Because of this, they often had to rely on trade and the goodwill of local shepherds and farmers. David, well aware of his reputation, set a strict code of honor: never steal and never mistreat the local people under any circumstances. This strict boundary kept their reputation untarnished and reflected David's deep respect for God's ways. Near the rugged slopes of Mount Carmel, David's warriors camped close to Nabal's shepherds for several months. They regularly patrolled the entire area, guarding the flocks from thieves and desert raiders who constantly preyed on the region. This free protection was incredibly valuable, especially for a wealthy landlord like Nabal, whose entire fortune relied on his sheep. Yet David never once demanded a single coin for this service. Their only goal was to keep the peace and prevent local clashes. Grateful for the shield, Nabal's herders treated David's men with deep respect and kindness. Word quickly spread about how well they got along and how safe the shepherds felt simply knowing David's soldiers were watching over them. Yet Nabal himself never officially acknowledged this help, let alone showed gratitude. As time went on, his arrogance became even more obvious. Meanwhile, the desperate need in David's camp grew more and more urgent. Changing seasons brought harder times, and their supplies quickly ran dry. David knew that relying solely on the desert's scarce resources was unsustainable. That was when he remembered the vital protection his men had offered Nabal's flocks. What is more, the sheep shearing season was now fast approaching, a time traditionally filled with feasting and abundance for wealthy livestock owners. During this season, it was common for landowners to host grand banquets, sharing their bounty with workers and anyone who had helped them. Relying on this tradition of hospitality and the moral duty of gratitude, David decided to send messengers to ask for provisions. His plan was simple and respectful. He wouldn't demand a thing. Instead, he would humbly present his request, appealing to Nabal's sense of fairness and gratitude. The messengers carried a clear message, reminding Nabal of how David's men protected his flocks. Asking for a little food for his hungry troops seemed only fair. especially considering the positive impact they had on his lands. However, in that unforgiving desert, where any decision could mean life or death, David's good intentions would soon face an unexpected obstacle. Nabal's sheer arrogance and stubborn nature would blind him to the kindness he had received. His response would sow the seeds of a conflict that only the wisdom of an extraordinary woman could hope to resolve. While waiting for the messengers to return, David and his men kept scraping by on the little they had. The mood in camp was hopeful but uneasy, as many knew all too well Nabal's reputation for being difficult. Still, they trusted that justice and reason would prevail. Little did they know, they were about to face a crisis that threatened their lives and pave the way for an unexpected alliance that would change history. The midday sun beat down when David's messengers finally reached Nabal's estate after a long, dusty journey. The purpose of David's messengers was clear. They introduced themselves respectfully to the estate servants and asked to speak directly with the landowner. When they were finally brought before Nabal, they bowed respectfully and began delivering David's carefully prepared message. "Peace and blessings be upon you, upon your house, and upon all you own." Keeping the warm, humble tone David had taught them, the men reminded Nabal how his servants and flocks had been kept safe by David's men the entire time. They explained that they had guaranteed the shepherd's safety and that nothing was stolen or lost while they were around, shielding them from bandits and raiders. After that, they made their request for a few provisions for David's camp during this sheep-shearing festival, a request that, under the circumstances, was both reasonable and honorable. But Nabal barely listened to them. Scorn was written all over his face. This arrogant man, used to judging people only by wealth and status, saw David as nothing but a trivial fugitive. "Who is David? Who is this son of Jesse?" he scoffed, raising his voice so everyone around could hear. "These days there are many servants who run away from their masters. Why should I take my bread, my water, and the meat I killed for my shearers, and give it to men coming from who knows where?" Nabal's words were deliberately offensive. He didn't just refuse the request. He did it in a humiliating way, insulting David and mocking his reputation. The servants standing nearby exchanged worried glances, knowing those harsh words could bring terrible consequences. Without arguing, David's messengers withdrew and returned to camp, stunned and deeply offended. Upon arrival, they told David everything that had happened: Nabal's mockery, his tone of contempt, and the insults hurled at him. David, who had shown only patience and humility during his exile, felt a hot anger rise within him. This was not just a personal insult. It insulted the justice and kindness his men had shown while protecting Nabal's flocks. Then David stood up and commanded in a firm voice, "Strap on your swords." His words echoed through the camp like thunder. The decision was made. He would not let Nabal's insolence go unanswered. David gathered 400 men to march against him, leaving 200 behind to protect the camp. His plan was clear: confront Nabal and punish him for his arrogance. As the men prepared to march, an atmosphere of tension and grim resolve filled the camp. David's followers trusted his leadership, though some felt a lingering unease, knowing that David was at his core a man of faith and justice. Right now, however, his decision seemed driven more by anger than wisdom. Even so, no one dared question his command. Meanwhile, at Nabal's house, the mood was entirely different. He continued enjoying the lavish feasts of the shearing season, utterly oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. Among the servants, however, tension was mounting. One of them, unable to bear the tension, decided to find Abigail. He knew if anyone could avert disaster, she was the one. Finding her, he spoke with urgency. "My lady David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master. but he screamed insults and chased them away. The servant continued, "These men were very good to us. They never did us any harm. While they were near, we did not lose a single sheep. I fear David and his men are planning revenge." Abigail listened closely, her mind instantly grasping the gravity of the situation. It was not the first time Nabal's folly put his household in danger, but this was different. David's name was known across all Israel, not just as a mighty warrior, but as the man many believed was destined to be the next king. Opposing him was not just foolish, it was a death sentence. Realizing this, Abigail knew she had to act immediately. There was no time to lose. Nabal did not understand the gravity of his mistake, but she did. She knew it was now up to her to save her household and the lives of everyone depending on her. Without hesitating, Abigail began gathering provisions and organizing her servants. She was preparing for a decisive encounter with David, a meeting that could prevent bloodshed and reveal the depth of her wisdom and courage. While supervising the preparations, a servant rushed in, visibly shaken. His pale face and breathless voice revealed the urgency of his message. Bowing respectfully before her, he said, "My lady Abigail, you must know something. David sent messengers from the wilderness in peace, but your husband insulted and rejected them." The servant explained that Nabal had been incredibly rude, not just rejecting the messengers, but humiliating them with harsh words. He then explained that David's men had been a priceless shield for their shepherds. While patrolling the region, they ensured no flocks were stolen or harmed the entire time. It was like having a wall of protection around everything we owned. "I fear David will not let this slide," the servant said anxiously. "He is a powerful man, and his warriors are ready to fight. We must act quickly." Abigail listened intently to every word. Though a shadow of worry crossed her face, she understood the situation perfectly. She knew Nabal was a foolish man whose arrogance had caused trouble before, but this time was different. David was no ordinary man. He was a respected leader, anointed by God and followed by hundreds of warriors. If he retaliated with violence, the fallout would be devastating, not just for Nabal's household, but for everyone who depended on it. Without wasting a single moment, Abigail made her choice. She knew she could not rely on Nabal to fix his own mistake. Reasoning with him was useless. Her discernment told her she had to act on her own, acting quickly and wisely before the conflict cost countless lives. Calmly, but with fierce determination, Abigail began preparing a generous peace offering for David and his men. She ordered her servants to gather the very best from their pantry, fresh bread cakes and skins full of wine, roasted meat, dried dates and pressed figs, enough food to sustain many men. While overseeing the preparations, Abigail also carefully rehearsed the words she would say to David. She knew she had to speak with absolute humility, yet with wisdom and persuasion, as she would be facing a man whose honor was wounded and who was consumed by anger. Her servants, used to her steady leadership, quickly obeyed. Within moments, the donkeys were loaded with provisions, and Abigail made herself ready to set out and meet David. Despite the gravity of the situation, her mind remained calm. Her trademark wisdom led her to trust in God, who had always sustained her, even in the darkest of times. Before leaving, Abigail gave strict orders to her servants not to tell Nabal a single thing about what was happening. She knew his stubborn pride would make him block any attempt at peace. Therefore, she chose to act in secret, trusting she was doing the right thing, not just to protect her home, but to honor God and prevent unnecessary bloodshed. The road to the wilderness was long and dusty. As night began to fall, Abigail and a small band of servants set off, leading the heavily loaded animals toward David's camp. Her heart pounded, but not from fear. She knew she was about to face a trial that would test all her wisdom and courage. As she journeyed through the darkness, she pondered the words she would speak, searching for a way to touch David's heart and soothe his anger. In the distance, torches from David's men flickered on the horizon. Abigail realized she was nearing her destination. Time was running out. If she did not intercept David before he reached Nabal's house, it would be too late. With a focused mind and a silent prayer in her heart, she begged God to give her the right words and the grace needed to complete her mission. Finally, Abigail and her group reached a strategic spot where they knew they would find David. She dismounted, adjusted her cloak, took a deep breath, knowing that in moments she would face the man who, though currently enraged, was also known to have a righteous heart. Abigail was ready to stand as the bridge between Nabal's madness and David's justice. She believed that wisdom and kindness could still triumph even in this dark hour. Night had fully fallen when Abigail finally met David and his men. The burning torches they carried lit up their grim, determined faces as they marched down the dusty road toward Nabal's home. David walked at the front, his sword buckled to his waist and a stern look on his face. His posture made it clear there was no room for mercy tonight. The sheer rage he felt had driven him to avenge the honor of his men. When Abigail saw the approaching army, she ordered her servants to go on ahead with the loaded animals. She gracefully stepped down from her donkey, adjusted her cloak, and walked humbly toward David. As she drew near, she bowed low to the ground in deep reverence. This gesture was more than respect. It was a desperate attempt to soothe the furious rage gripping David's heart. He stopped when he saw her. The presence of this woman was entirely unexpected. It was rare for a woman, especially in such a dangerous situation, to show such immense courage. Before he could speak, Abigail looked up and addressed him with a steady yet humble voice. "My lord, please listen to your servant. Pay no attention to the wicked behavior of my husband Nabal, for he is just like his name. He is a foolish man, and folly goes with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men you sent. Had I known, I would have stopped this offense." Abigail paused briefly and gestured to the pack animals. "Please accept this gift that your servants have brought, and let it be given to the men who follow you. Please accept this offering and forgive my husband's offense." But this was about more than just a plea for forgiveness. Above all else, I beg you not to let anger drive you to shed innocent blood or seek vengeance with your own hands. The Lord your God fights for you, and he will bring justice in his time. David, who had been consumed by rage just moments before, began to listen closely. Abigail's words were more than a plea for mercy. They were a powerful reminder of his own faith. With deep conviction, Abigail continued, "The Lord will surely make you a lasting dynasty, because you fight the battles of the Lord. Even if someone hunts you down to take your life, your soul will be safe with the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies will be flung away like stones hurled from a sling. And when the Lord has fulfilled every promise he made to you, appointing you ruler over Israel, your conscience will not bear the heavy burden of needless bloodshed." Abigail's incredible wisdom and courage struck a deep chord in David's heart. He was a man who recognized God's voice. Even in the heat of passion, the blinding rage that consumed him began to melt away. Abigail's vision of his future reign, free from the stain of reckless vengeance, brought instant clarity to David's heart. Then David finally spoke, his voice much calmer now. "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you to meet me today. Blessed is your good judgment, and blessed are you for keeping me from slaughter and self-revenge today." He knew that if she had not intervened, not a single man in Nabal's household would have lived to see the sunrise. David accepted her gifts and promised to call off the attack. He saw clearly that God had used this remarkable woman to keep him from committing a terrible mistake. The silence that followed brought immense relief to David's men. They realized the wind had completely shifted. Abigail's wisdom had averted a massacre. Grateful, she bowed low before David one last time and began her journey home. As she rode away, David and his men stood there reflecting on what had just transpired. They were stunned, not just by Abigail's profound wisdom and character, but by how God had intervened at that critical moment to guide David's steps. David replayed the encounter, realizing something vital. Abigail had reminded him to trust in God's justice rather than his own wrath. For Abigail, restraining anger and acting with wisdom was the ultimate expression of courage and faith. She knew these virtues could transform even the darkest circumstances. From that moment on, their paths began to intertwine in a story that would echo through generations. By dawn, Abigail was heading back home. Her steps felt light, knowing she had preserved the peace, her heart overflowing with gratitude. It had been a long, terrifying night, but she was certain her quick action had saved her family and community from absolute disaster. The servants with her breathed a sigh of relief. Their faces showed deep gratitude, knowing their mistress's quick wit and wisdom had completely changed their fate. When they finally reached the house, the atmosphere was a jarring contrast to the night's terror. The courtyard echoed with laughter, music, and drunken shouting. Nabal had absolutely no idea how close he had come to death. He was hosting a lavish feast fit for a king, with tables overflowing with food and wine as the guests drank heavily, completely plastered, just like the host himself. Abigail watched in silence. Nabal sat at the center of it all, his face flushed red from wine, laughing loudly and shouting. Everything about his behavior screamed foolishness. His complete lack of self-control, his arrogance, and his obsession with pleasure. In that moment, Abigail felt a profound, heavy exhaustion. She had risked her life to save a man who had no idea how close he was to dying. Still, she kept quiet. She knew confronting a blackout drunk Nabal would be utterly pointless. Wisdom told her to wait. With the same calm focus she had maintained all night, Abigail retired to bed, letting the drunken revelry run its course. The hours slowly slipped away. As dawn broke and the party noise died down, Nabal woke up with a massive hangover. The house was finally dead silent. The guests were gone, leaving only the wreckage of the feast behind. That was when Abigail approached her husband, calm but deadly serious. It was time for the truth. In a steady voice, she began. "There is something urgent you need to know," she said. She laid out everything, explaining how David's men came in peace, only for Nabal to insult them. She revealed that David and his army had been marching to slaughter every single man in the household, and that she had to act fast to stop the slaughter. As Abigail spoke, Nabal's face completely changed. His hangover days turned to pure shock. With every word, the color drained from his face. Suddenly, his body locked up as the sheer weight of reality crashed down. The shock left him paralyzed, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with terror. He could not utter a single word. It was as if life itself had been drained from him. Abigail watched in silence as her husband sat there, utterly unresponsive, his heart weakened by a lifetime of excess, and sudden, paralyzing fear simply gave out. Nabal collapsed. His body was present, but his mind was completely gone. Servants rushed to revive him, but nothing worked. The proud man, who had spent his life mocking and scorning others, was now completely helpless, a victim of his own stupidity. Over the next few days, Abigail dutifully cared for him, just as she always had. Despite everything, she fulfilled her role with dignity, knowing Nabal's ultimate fate now lay entirely in God's hands. 10 days later, Nabal died. He left behind a legacy defined entirely by greed and foolishness. For Abigail, though, his death was no cause for celebration. Instead, it was a time of solemn reflection on God's justice, even as the household reeled from losing its master. The servants and neighbors realized something vital. Abigail's wisdom and courage had saved them all from ruin. She proved that real strength is not found in wealth or power, but in the ability to act with wisdom, humility, and faith in God. Her name would be remembered not just for her actions, but for the incredible character she showed in the face of adversity. In Maon, a heavy silence fell. News of Nabal's death spread fast among neighbors and servants, leaving everyone in shock and deep thought. The man notorious for his massive wealth and harsh temper died not by an enemy's sword, but from the weight of his own foolish choices. Many began to view his sudden death as a clear sign of God's judgment, a stark reminder that pride and arrogance carry heavy consequences. Yet for Abigail, these events brought neither joy nor any sense of triumph. She kept walking with the same humility that had always guided her life. Though Abigail had endured years of misery and neglect because of her husband, her heart harbored no desire for revenge. Instead, it remained filled with reverence and awe before God, who had stepped in so decisively. From the very moment Nabal fell ill, Abigail surrendered her husband's fate to the Lord, praying only for God's will to be done. When he finally breathed his last, she didn't see it as a mere accident or a random event, but as a direct act of divine justice, something far beyond her own understanding. Soon, the entire community began to ponder the true meaning of what had happened. For all his immense wealth and social standing, Nabal had been destroyed by his own pride and the contempt he showed toward others, especially David, the very man God had chosen to be the future king of Israel. To many, his sudden end was a warning that neither status nor worldly riches can shield someone from God's judgment. Among the locals, some began recalling the ancient proverbs of Israel. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Nabal had lived without that fear, trusting only in his money and his own mind. The lesson was clear. God does not tolerate pride. Even if his justice seems slow to arrive, it always does. Abigail, meanwhile, was now seen as the instrument of that divine justice. Her intervention had stopped David and his men from shedding innocent blood, protecting David's integrity and the future God had prepared for him as leader of Israel. Her quick thinking, wisdom, and courage had saved not just her family, but the entire community from an absolute tragedy. Servants, neighbors, and even shepherds from nearby areas began speaking of Abigail not just as a beautiful and wise woman, but as someone whose faith and discernment were used by God for a higher purpose. Now, in the quiet of her home, Abigail reflected on everything that had transpired. She remembered the words David spoke when he blessed her. "Blessed be you for your good judgment, which kept me from shedding blood this day." Those words echoed in her mind, proving that she had acted not for her own gain, but to honor God and save lives. Nabal's death also marked a brand new beginning for Abigail. For the first time in years, she felt the heavy burden of her husband's foolishness and selfishness lift from her shoulders. Yet she didn't celebrate his absence. Instead, she set about managing her home with justice and mercy, ensuring that the servants and shepherds who once suffered under Nabal's rule now experienced leadership defined by true integrity. The divine judgment on Nabal was an act of correction, but also a reminder that God never ignores the suffering of the righteous. Abigail, who had endured years of humiliation and hardship with quiet patience, now saw her loyalty honored in a way only God could orchestrate. Her story became not just a warning to the arrogant and foolish, but a powerful testimony for those who trust in God and walk in wisdom. She proved that humility, faith, and wisdom are always rewarded in God's perfect timing. In the days that followed, as servants restored order and neighbors offered respectful support, Abigail felt a deep inner peace. She knew her life had been spared for a greater purpose. Though she still didn't fully understand what lay ahead, she trusted that the same God who had guided her this far would continue to direct her steps. Divine justice hadn't just brought judgment to Nabal, but it also opened a new door for Abigail. Her days of suffering were transformed into a living testimony of God's power and wisdom. Her story would be told for generations, a reminder that pride comes before a fall, but humility and faith are rewarded in God's perfect time. Meanwhile, word of Nabal's death spread quickly. David, still out in the wilderness with his men, received the news from arriving messengers. Nabal was dead after days of sickness. Hearing this, David reflected deeply on the recent events and recognized the hand of God at work. "Praise God for everything that has happened," David declared out loud, so all his men could hear. "He has championed my cause against Nabal's insult and kept his servant from doing evil. The Lord has returned Nabal's wickedness upon his own head." To David, Nabal's death wasn't just the end of an enemy, but confirmation that God was fighting for him, guiding his steps and protecting his divine destiny. A heart that days ago burned with rage was now filled with gratitude and awe. And it also made him remember Abigail, this woman whose wisdom and humility had prevented senseless bloodshed, had shown him what it truly meant to rely on God's perfect justice. David remembered how Abigail had approached him with words of peace, appealing not just to his honor, but to his deep faith. The memory of that noble woman risking her life to protect others remained vivid in his mind. He knew Abigail was far more than just beautiful. She was a powerful ally, someone who could support him on the path toward the great destiny God had set before him. With this in mind, David made his decision and sent messengers to Maon with a proposal of marriage for Abigail. It was no sudden impulse or superficial interest, but a choice built on the deep respect and admiration he felt for her. He knew Abigail, with her exceptional character, could stand by his side on the grueling path unfolding ahead. Reaching her home, the messengers were received with courtesy and delivered David's words with deep reverence, explaining that their leader saw her as a wise and virtuous woman. "Our masters sent us to speak with you," they said. "David desires you to become his wife, recognizing a character in you that honors God." Abigail was momentarily stunned by the proposal. Though she knew David spoke highly of her after their meeting, she never expected to receive such a significant and honorable proposal. After pausing to reflect, she realized this was far more than just a marriage. It was a step in the divine plan God was unfolding for her life. With deep humility, Abigail stood, bowed low, and replied, "Here is your maidservant, ready to wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Her simple answer spoke volumes about her character, a heart full of modesty, gratitude, and a readiness to serve. Abigail never viewed this union as a way to elevate herself, but rather as an opportunity to serve God's greater purpose through her life. Losing no time, Abigail prepared to depart with David's men. After leaving clear instructions for her household during her absence, she embarked on a new chapter of her life. She trusted that the Lord who had guided her this far would continue directing her steps. Arriving at David's camp, Abigail was greeted with deep respect. Seeing her, David remembered how bravely and wisely she had disarmed his fury just days before. Abigail radiated a peace that seemed even more profound now. "Blessed be the Lord who has sent you to me," David declared. "You will be more than a wife. You will be my partner on this journey God has given us." With those words, they were wed. Their union was no mere chance meeting, but proof that God works through the toughest circumstances to fulfill His divine purposes. And Abigail, who had spent years as a beacon of faith amidst the madness of her old home, now found a place of honor beside the future king of Israel. Yet beyond any royal title, Abigail knew her true calling remained unchanged, to be an instrument of justice, peace, and devotion to God. After marrying David, Abigail left the comfort of Maon behind, stepping into a volatile life marked by constant fleeing political intrigue and daily survival. David, though anointed by God as the future king of Israel, was still a hunted fugitive, fleeing King Saul and struggling to manage hundreds of desperate men in the wilderness. Abigail, used to handling the constant stress of her former home, now faced a completely different world where politics, warfare, and faith were intertwined. From the moment she arrived in camp, she carried herself with grace and wisdom. She knew that life at David's side would be grueling, but she understood this was all part of God's sovereign plan. Her presence did not go unnoticed by David's band of warriors. Many began to see her as far more than just their leader's wife, viewing her instead as a source of calm and wisdom. Despite the hardships, Abigail adapted quickly, supporting her husband and winning the hearts of his loyal followers. These men were fiercely loyal, yet they lived under a cloud of constant anxiety and stress due to their precarious lifestyle. Supplies were scarce, their future was highly uncertain, and the looming threat of Saul's army kept everyone on a constant knife edge of survival. Abigail was no passive spectator. She stepped right into the group dynamics, listening to the men's fears and offering calm, reassuring words, proving her unique gift for settling disputes and diffusing tension. The wisdom she gained during her grueling years with Nabal became a priceless asset to David. Yet she also faced the hard trial of sharing her husband with other wives, including Ahinoam of Jezreel. Though such arrangements often bred jealousy and bitter rivalry, Abigail carried herself with her signature humility and grace. Rather than dwelling on friction, she poured her energy into being a steadfast companion and support to David, trusting God to grant her the discernment needed for this complex new life. In quiet moments of solitude, she pondered the massive transformation in her life, going from the wife of a foolish, arrogant tyrant to the partner of God's own anointed leader, a man with a heavy prophetic destiny. Yet she knew this new path offered far more than privilege. It demanded massive responsibility. Abigail knew her place at his side was not a life of luxury, but a sacred calling to serve. She understood the crushing weight of leadership on David's shoulders and realized she must be his constant anchor through every brutal trial and sudden triumph. In her daily prayers, she begged for the strength and wisdom to fulfill this calling, knowing she could only survive the coming storms with God's direct guidance. In time, Abigail became a highly trusted counselor to David. Her sharp conflict resolution skills and her unique ability to read people's true intentions made her indispensable in a world where swift political and military decisions meant life or death. David, holding her intellect in high regard, routinely sought her counsel before making major moves. Once Abigail stepped into a critical crisis during a mutinous dispute. A few warriors, driven mad by starving conditions, openly questioned David's decisions, muttering that his leadership was dragging them to ruin. Abigail immediately saw the danger brewing. She urged David to act quickly, repairing the broken trust and fragile unity among his followers. Her words, rich with wisdom and caution, helped David resolve the rebellion before things spiraled out of control. Beyond being a trusted guide, Abigail also gave David moments of peace amidst the heavy burdens of leadership. Her conversations with him, always full of faith and wisdom, reminded David that his calling did not depend on his circumstances, but on God's promise. She urged him to stand firm, trusting that the Lord would fulfill his plan in due time. For Abigail, life beside David was more than just a passing season. It was a calling to a greater purpose. She understood that being the wife of an anointed leader was not a personal privilege, but a sacred responsibility. Through her words, actions, and prayers, Abigail sought to strengthen David and help fulfill the divine destiny over his life and Israel. Despite all the challenges, Abigail stood firm, trusting that God had placed her exactly where she needed to be. Her wisdom, patience, and faith made her not only the ideal companion for David, but an inspiration to everyone around her. Those who knew her saw the same woman who had once faced a future king with courage and humility, now walking by his side, playing a crucial role in a journey that would change the destiny of a nation. Yet Abigail's life with David was not without trials. Even after David took the throne of Israel, the struggles did not end. Though God's promise was fulfilled and David reigned as king, tensions quickly flared both inside and outside the kingdom walls. Constant political friction, internal rivalries, and tribal power struggles demanded decisive leadership and incredibly tough decisions. Abigail remained a pillar of wisdom and poise, offering faithful, prudent counsel within David's inner circle. In a royal court filled with advisors, fierce warriors, and ambitious family members, tension was a daily reality. The unavoidable political and military choices, combined with bitter rivalries among David's wives and children, threatened to tear the kingdom apart. Known for her peaceful, balanced nature, Abigail became a vital mediator in critical moments. On one occasion, a heated dispute broke out involving Joab, commander of David's army, and other high-ranking military leaders. The argument was over the right strategy to use against a band of rebels. As voices grew louder and tempers flared, Abigail stepped in with a quiet observation that completely shifted the tone of the room. A leader must not only win battles, but also protect the unity of those fighting by his side, Abigail said calmly. Her words, though simple, forced the men to stop and rethink their stance. Instead of fueling deeper division, they began working toward a compromise that would unite them. When David learned of Abigail's intervention, he gathered his men and thanked her for her wisdom. "Your wisdom is like a deep well from which everyone can drink," he said. "Your words bring peace, even in the darkest hours." These words reflected not only David's personal admiration, but also Abigail's rising influence within the royal court and among the king's inner circle. Beyond political matters, Abigail played a vital role in the personal relationships surrounding David. She treated everyone with genuine empathy, grace, and understanding, making her approachable to anyone seeking guidance. Many of David's wives, who dealt with natural rivalries within the palace, often turned to Abigail for counsel. On one occasion, when tension flared between Ahinoam and Bathsheba, Abigail intervened with great care. Instead of taking sides, she urged them to consider how their conflict might hurt the kingdom and the future of their children. "A king's sons learn to rule by watching their mothers," she advised gently. "That is the greatest lesson they can receive." Although the rivalries never vanished entirely, Abigail's peacemaking kept them in check. Her influence also reached David's children. Absalom, famous for his fierce ambition and fiery temper, actually listened to her with respect, even if he rarely followed her counsel. Still, their relationship showed her unique ability to reach even the hardest of hearts. Despite her busy role, Abigail still found time to reflect on her own journey and the path God had carved for her, whether during hectic days or in the quiet palace nights. Often, she looked up at the stars, remembering the long road that brought her here. She thought of the young woman who once endured the foolishness of an arrogant husband. Now she walked beside a king serving her people and God with all her heart. Abigail knew that every step of her life was part of a grander design. The painful years with Nabal, though marked by suffering, had forged her strength and sharpened her discernment. Meeting David, which began as a desperate plea to save her household, had blossomed into a new chapter full of purpose. Now, beside the throne of Israel, she clearly saw God's hand guiding her entire path. In quiet moments of prayer, she would often think, "I do not understand all the ways of the Lord, but I know they are good. He has led me through dark valleys and over high mountains." With every step, she learned to trust Him more deeply. These reflections not only strengthened her faith, but also helped her maintain the right perspective amidst the heavy challenges of palace life. Her wisdom, forged in faith and experience, did not just guide David and his inner circle, but also left a lasting mark on the history of Israel. Her gift for acting with prudence, speaking truth, and loving with compassion made her a respected, enduring figure in the kingdom. She became a model for everyone around her. Even those who did not share her devotion recognized that her life was a living testament of wisdom, humility, and trust in God. Abigail knew her time on earth was fleeting, but she was driven by a greater force at work within her. She believed the seeds she had sown through her service and counsel would bear fruit for generations to come. Her story would prove that even in the midst of bitter conflict, wisdom and faith can triumph, bringing peace, justice, and purpose. Even amid the tense struggles of King David's reign, Abigail remained a beacon of hope, a loyal advisor, and a woman whose character mirrored the heart of God. As years passed, the memory of Abigail was etched into the heart of Israel as a model of wisdom, humility, and faith. Though her story takes up only a few pages in the Bible, her impact stretches far beyond the written words. We see it in the choices she shaped, the lives she saved, and how her very soul mirrored the will of God. In her final years, during quiet moments of deep prayer, Abigail often looked back on the path she had walked. She remembered how God guided her from those painful days in her old home to the life-changing moments with David. She realized every season of her life was crafted by the Creator for a grander purpose. Her journey was never about power or fame. It was defined by quiet service, sacrifice, and unyielding faith. Looking back, Abigail knew the Lord had carried her through every single storm. He had guided her steps through both shadow and light. In her heart, she knew none of her pain was wasted, for God had a hand in everything. This truth was more than her personal testimony. It was a lesson that echoed in the lives of everyone she touched. Abigail's legacy was not just about her time with King David or her rank in court. Her bold stand in that crucial hour, when rage threatened to consume David's heart, had massive consequences. Her wisdom and courage did more than save innocent lives. They preserved the integrity of Israel's future king. By stopping a bloody act of revenge, Abigail kept David's conscience clean, saving him from a tragic, irreversible mistake. Though her intervention seemed small at the time, its impact rippled throughout the history of Israel. Because of this, Abigail became a living picture of God's justice. She was someone willing to act with humility, read the moment perfectly, and trust completely in divine power. Her ability to bring calm and wisdom to the worst crises made her truly extraordinary. Her life story proves that even in the toughest situations, you can live with purpose and honor God with every single choice. But the real secret of Abigail's strength was not her sharp mind, her royal rank, or her physical beauty. It was something much deeper, a sincere personal connection with the Lord. Every choice she made and every word she spoke flowed from this absolute trust, and this faith turned her life into a lasting testament of wisdom, courage, and loyalty. God was in control, and Abigail trusted His path completely. This faith did more than just strengthen her during trials. It gave her the clarity to act with justice and deep wisdom. Abigail never chased fame or looked out for herself. Her only drive was to honor God and shield those under her care. This commitment made her a powerful force for peace and justice. Today, her journey remains a living testament to a life fully surrendered to God. Even when her time on earth came to a close, her legacy endured. Abigail's life serves as a constant reminder that wisdom, humility, and faith can reshape the most difficult circumstances. For anyone facing hard times, conflict, or uncertainty, her story shows how to walk with purpose and confidence, knowing that God is with you every step of the way. So Abigail, the woman who saved her household with wise words, stood beside the King of Israel, serving with humility and inspiring generations. Her life proves that every choice guided by God can touch souls and serve a higher calling. I hope this beautiful Bible story of Abigail, a woman of wisdom, humility, and unshakable faith, inspires you too. Looking at her legacy, we see how trusting God, acting with wisdom, and walking in humility can turn hardships into monuments of grace. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to our channel for more inspiration. Drop a comment below sharing what part of her story touched you most, or which Bible figures you want to hear about next. And remember to share this video with friends and family so they can discover the incredible life and legacy of Abigail. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.